We're going to do a run and gun bridge camera comparison of the Canon SX50 and the Lumix FZ1000. We're going to look at it from a YouTube videographer point of view. What do I mean by that? Well, we're looking for a simple camera with good stabilization, high speed, maybe some slow-mo, a very versatile lens. We need to be able to pull out JPEGs perhaps from the video, some depth of field, obviously great sound, and features that we can use. We want an autofocus also that works quickly and efficiently. We're going to take these two cameras and put them on a mount side by side so we can really do a great comparison of the features at the same time. The Canon SX50 has been around for about a year. The FZ1000 has just come out August 2014 and is over double the price. Are you getting double the features? Well, it does 4K video, which is pretty awesome, and it has a few other built-in features as well. But for a run and gun YouTube video, let's have a look. Optical stabilization. Both cameras have switchable stabilization off and on. It's optical, in other words it's a mechanical system. Very useful when either you're walking long, shooting live video, or if you're doing a long handheld telephoto shot, especially on the Canon with that very long 50x zoom. Both systems work well. Slow motion is accomplished in both cameras by shooting at high frame rates, 120 frames per second. The Canon only shoots at 640p resolution, unfortunately, so you get a lot of artifacts in its pixel and you can't really blow it up. The Lumix is at 1080, very, very nice. You can even edit it. You still see some color artifacts in the water, and it gets a little bit pixely when it's blown up, but a very nice, smooth picture quality. Of course, the Canon optical zoom is insane 50 times. It's a little bit fast and difficult to operate smoothly, but it does an amazing power to zoom in closely. The Canon focusing system, you can see, is a little bit lazy, and you'll see that later on in the response. It can be a bit frustrating at times, particularly with moving objects in the background. If you throw in some of the digital zoom on top of the optical, you have very close-in shots with very little loss of quality. We pulled a 2 meg frame out of this video, and it does a pretty good still shot. If we look at the Lumix, it's a 16 times optical zoom, not quite as nice as the 50. It is a Leica zoom though. And 2.8 to f4 gives you some pretty good light control as well, and depth of field. It also has a digital expansion, of course, on there by up to 4 times, which gives you some pretty close-in looking video without a whole lot of pixels in it. So they do a good job of the digital video. The reason that digital zoom works well with the optical on the Lumix is that there's 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor in there, which allows a lot of data to be saved. We're going to zoom in on this lighthouse at the end of that island, almost beyond what you can see with the naked eye. Wide-angle shots on both are about the same, 24-25mm equivalents, almost identical. But we're going to start zooming in now and seeing what kind of data image we can pull out of there. If we look at the top zoom on the Lumix 400, it's still very similar on the Canon. It hasn't even warmed up yet on its zoom. If we zoom up to the Canon's 1200mm equivalent and add the optical on the Lumix, the same. Actually, the picture quality is still pretty good on the Lumix. That extra 20 megapixels of data in there really does help. If we take a little piece out of this picture at full zoom, we'll just take a look at the lighthouse. In fact, we're just going to have a look at the flag eventually on the Canon, very high quality. If we take that image out on the Lumix, you have a hard time to tell, even blown up. On YouTube, certainly very adequate. It will be averaging it out on most mobile devices. But let's really zoom in and pull the data out of those pictures. If we look at the Canon, pixely looking flag. Lumix, not too bad. So I'm very impressed by the amount of data that can be squeezed out of the high density data set of the Lumix. 4K video essentially is shooting 8 megapixel images at 24 frames a second. This 2-second shot, the camera managed to lock in. From that very brief video, I managed to pull an 8 megapixel JPEG out of the video, and then I took that and zoomed in even closer and got a pretty good picture of that bomber flying over. I was impressed by both the speed the Lumix locked in on the focus and the quality of the image. The mighty zoom lens on the Canon unfortunately gives it a very broad depth of field because of its smaller apertures. You notice the distracting detail in the background of somebody walking by. The Lumix lens, on the other hand, is more open and blurs out the foreground and background nicely, allowing you to focus on the subject. Here's the Canon. You may want focus right from the front pedals right to the leaves at the back. It can be a bit distracting. On the Lumix, you've got a much tighter depth of field control, and you see that right in the viewfinder. For a big zoom lens on the Canon, it's actually pretty quiet moving in and out, although the focus can be a little bit slow and lazy. But the only sound you really hear is the clicking of the switch, the telephoto wide angle switch going back and forth. If we have a listen to the Lumix, there's 15 elements in there in 11 groups being moved around, and you'll find that it's quite a bit noisier. And in a quiet room on a quiet recording, it sounds like somebody's stripping out fishing line off of a fishing reel. It can be definitely a little bit distracting. Probably normally you wouldn't notice it, but in a quiet room, yeah, there's been a few comments on that on the various websites. Both cameras do a pretty good job of finding the subject matter and focusing on it and not being distracted by blinds or other materials in the foreground or in the background. So for the most part, they're pretty much the same. Resolution is basically data size and computer processing horsepower. This high def 1280 by 720, 30 frames a second, 8-second shot. I'm going to run it through Stabilization software, and to do that takes about 20 seconds. And the file size is about 2 megabytes per second for that size of density. If we go to full high definition, 1920 by 1080, we're now running at, again, 24 frames per second. If we run that through Stabilization software, it's gone up to 30 seconds, and we're running about a 3 megabyte per second file size, so almost a 50% increase in processing time as well as file size. The Lumix one at 60 frames per second, again a much smooth video, great quality, but it takes a little bit more power now, 40 seconds to process it, stabilize at 3.5 megabyte per second file size. If we go to the really big monster, which is the 4K size, 24 frames per second, fantastic looking video, but it takes enormous computer horsepower to run this thing. It was a full 80 seconds and 12 megabytes a second file size. This thing is a brute, and a lot of computers will not be able to process it. So bottom line, I think from a YouTube run and gun videographer, the features in the Lumix, you might not be really using that many. The zoom and the quality of the Canon for its price, I don't think can be beat. So at this time, I'm going with the Canon. Down the road, it's hard to say where 4K video is going to go. It's a great thing to pull frames out of, but it takes enormous computer horsepower to work with it. So that was my brief review of the two cameras. They're both great, but my tip is for the Canon right now. Thanks for watching.